No continuity, transition, sense of time progression, or distances at all. None at all. That's one of the most glaring issues too, is quick travel. It's so infuriating. I mean, Elrond alone was like flying around all over the map. It's hard to have any sense of continuity when there is also no sense of time in the show. Everything is so lazy in regards to the conception and production of it, that they don't want to take the time to not even do basic character journeys and well thought out character arcs. So Isildur and Theo and Prince Durin and Elendil, like, there are characters that feel utterly useless in this season. Don't get me started on the Harfoots. Completely useless. So how about if you don't know what to do with those storylines and characters, then maybe focus on what you do care about. So obviously the most care and attention was for Sauron and the Smiths of Eregion. I mean, most people, even its fans and ones that do have issues with it, cite Sauron as being the best part of the show. And I would agree with that. You can tell that's where they cared the most. And we spend a good amount of time there, but more time could be spent in Eregion with Celebrimbor. But I feel like we're jumping around at points and the story is going on off screen that the audience isn't aware of and we're having to catch up later. But it seems like the most time and progression of a character is given to Sauron. And that's probably why it's the best for people. Like even Arondir this season. What was the point of him? What was his character arc? There wasn't any. We had a bit of the beginning where, okay, we're having to catch up from where we left in season 1 when he was with Bronwyn. Bronwyn has died because the actress didn't want to return, so they just killed her off. But there's nothing that he does that feels organic. It just feels like he's there this season. They don't want to kill him off, but they also don't want to give him a satisfying character arc. So he's only there in Eregion because he found a map on an orc that he killed in the Southlands. It's so contrived why he's here. The actions that he takes are so contrived. None of it feels satisfying. They could have done something to show him mourning for Bronwyn more deeply. And I think there could have been something there with him and the Entwives more. There was just like a one little scene, but I feel like you definitely could have done more with that. Done more through him, because you already kind of paved the way for that, his connection to the forest. You could have done more time with Arondir and the Entwives, and I think that would have been a more satisfying point for this character, and have him be like fighting for the forest, fighting for that, and have the Entwives be more significant. They kind of like lost an opportunity there. Like, why do you have them in here if you're only going to see them for like a few minutes and then never again? I think people actually liked the introduction of the Entwive and have that little interaction with her and Arondir, and that was like the most satisfying thing of his arc this season. Other than that, it feels like they just didn't know what to do with him, that he's just being inserted into scenes because they just feel like he should be there, other than actually giving him something like a satisfying arc. So having his connection be to the forest and the Entwives and preserving them, and maybe having some lingering things like if he did die, have that tragedy be there about how him and Bronwyn's fates are different. Like maybe he had the conversation with one of the Entwives about how they will be separated forever, and how he mourns that, and maybe he'd find some peace. And then maybe that would end up with a more satisfying arc if he does have that noble death. Which, when you think about it, I think we don't have any characters that died, I don't know, that we feel anything for. And it could have been something like that. It could have been something like with the emotional impact of Boromir with Arondir, and having that extra tragedy of how he's separated from Bronwyn forever. So he's just tacked on here, magically appearing. Either he finds a MacGuffin to get him to the place that they need him to be, and they want their cake and eat it too. Also, they want to have a noble death scene, but they don't want Arondir to die. So he's just going to magically appear. If you just workshopped it and actually cared about your characters and had some planning and forethought and had that love for Tolkien's world and mythology. But we don't have that. We don't even have basic levels of care in this production. Many Amazon warehouse workers had to suffer and sacrifice their toilet breaks so Rings of Power could happen. And lots of good shows on Amazon Prime are being canceled. They gotta make room for this budget. Shows that people are actually watching. I think they spent $250 million on the rights, and season 1 cost around $160 million. $1 billion is the total cost of the 5 seasons. I already did like several videos on this, but the mainstream media has reported when Payne and McKay were on the red carpet promoting season 2, and they said that they weren't sure about season 3 yet. The trades were reporting that season 1, the production of season 1, cost $465 million. And there was one that said now $1 billion was that initial allotment for 5 seasons. And so it did mention that too. And it also mentioned that they had spent $465 million of it already for season 1. They didn't have a budget for season 2 yet, but that's what they were reporting. There were several mainstream media trades reporting that. But that's what they touted. The shows it cost $1 billion. And they've already spent most of that. It's pretty crazy. And now for season 2, they had to change locations. They had to up and move to the UK to film. That's ridiculous that Amazon is canceling good content to prop up this loser. Sad. Can you imagine how many other good shows could have been greenlit or renewed to make way for this? It's actually really tragic when you think about it, because it's the second age show. Like, people were definitely psyched about it. We were all psyched about it, but we were excited because we all thought that it was going to be an adaptation, of what Tolkien wrote. That's why fans were hopeful. But no, they didn't have the rights for that. So I guess that gives them the freedom to just make up and do whatever they want with it. And the estate is completely okay with that. Money laundering intensifies. I honestly don't know how they ended up spending that much money on season 1, but it doesn't actually surprise me when you consider how much other shows are costing on premium shows on other streaming services. Season 2 must have had a bigger budget. I think so, yeah. They had to move and they had to build new sets, a lot of new sets that they didn't use before, new locations. I think they filmed on location for the rune scenes, so there was that as well. And I think it was similar. And when you think about it, because now it's revealed that the Acolyte, Star Wars The Acolyte, ended up costing $230 million. They just revealed that. Some sort of a financial report came out, and it was I guess in euros is what they were initially reporting it as, the euros as US dollars, but it actually ended up being, like, when you convert it, was 230 million US dollars for The Acolyte, which The Acolyte was 8 30-minute episodes. So when you think about that, and other shows too, like on premium streaming services, their budgets are getting out of control. So it actually doesn't surprise me all that much that season 1 cost as much as it did. There was a financial report for, like, Apple TV Plus that they're spending over $20 million an episode for Severance, a show that mostly takes place in office spaces and houses, like urban settings, and is not VFX heavy at all. And so they had to, like, make certain changes behind the scenes as far as their spending. Apple TV Plus, they're probably spending the most on content nobody watches, but they have the money. So keeping all that in mind, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that Amazon spent that much, especially because you have showrunners who are so inexperienced. They don't have an official credit to their name before they got signed on to this show. So that explains it too, that if you have someone who's inexperienced, doesn't know how to run a production on this scale and size, and doesn't plan ahead and has to do a lot of reshoots or work in post-production, that stuff costs money when you don't plan ahead. Those mistakes and shortcomings end up costing you later. And they also had extra costs, I guess, in this season as well, probably with some delays as far as the writer's strike and actor strike. I don't know if that affected it much. But again, they're dealing with similar things, having to move locations, having to move studios, filming locations, filming in new locations, building new costumes, sets, and hiring new actors. And it's very VFX heavy. The money went to extravagant pre-release promo campaigns. This show is a huge Amazon Prime ad. You can bet they wish it was doing better. All this money, all this talent, how do you mess up this badly? I mean, they have talent in front of the screen, but not behind it, unfortunately.